The traditional costume of Japan, the kimono, is an elegant garment that makes a woman look her best. With their wide variety of seasonal designs, kimonos reflect Japan's rich natural beauty. The obi, the sash, makes a kimono even more gorgeous. More than 3 meters long, the obi is tied in a beautiful and often elaborate knot. Yet even the most sumptuous kimono is constructed quite simply, just 8 rectangular strips of fabric sewn together. The origin of the kimono as we know it today was an undergarment worn in ancient Japan. Later, during the days of the samurai, authorities tried to ban extravagant kimonos, and they unwittingly inspired a kimono revolution. In the early 20th century, kimonos with bold new designs appeared. They look fresh even today, and are enjoying popularity with a new generation of young women. On this edition of Begin Japanology, we look at kimonos, which fully embody the Japanese sense of beauty. A woman looks beautiful in a kimono, but there are a number of special rules to wearing one. Married women and unmarried women wear different kimonos. A single woman wears a broad-sleeve kimono on formal occasions, like the New Year or the annual official coming-of-age ceremony. These kimonos are always eye-catching. They're decorated with dyed and embroidered patterns, and the sleeves are so wide that when you put your arms at your sides, the sleeves almost touch the ground. The most formal garment for a married woman is a narrow-sleeved kimono. Worn at events like family weddings, its base color is black, but it has a luxurious design on the skirt. A family crest is displayed in such places as the upper back and the sleeves. The narrower sleeves symbolize that the woman wearing it is now married. This kind of narrow-sleeve kimono became formal wear in the early 20th century. It's said that the trend was inspired by formal Western attire. For semi-formal occasions, both married and unmarried women wear a so-called visiting kimono. Unlike the formal narrow-sleeve kimono, the visiting kimono has lavish designs on its shoulders and sleeves as well as on its skirt. Visiting kimonos are often worn to tea gatherings, parties, and other social visits, hence the name. It's extremely important to wear the right kimono at the right time and place. This includes observing many conventions that have to do with the seasons of the year. From October to May, when the weather is colder, kimonos with a lining should be worn. From June to September, when it's hot, is the time for kimonos without any lining. And for the hottest days of summer, there are kimonos made of gauzy silk. This kind of kimono makes not only the wearer feel cooler, but also the people looking at it. A kimono should always reflect consideration for those who will see it. Kimonos are constructed using a special method. Before the kimono is sewn, the fabric is ironed to align and tighten up the weave of the fabric. This is an essential task.
All the fabric comes to us with the weave stretched out. If we sewed the fabric without tightening up the weave first, the fabric would shrink later on. We do this ironing to prevent that from happening.
Bolts of fabric prepared in this way are cut into rectangular strips of set dimensions, and these strips are then sewn together. Unlike Western garments, which are made from pieces with curved and straight edges, kimonos are made from pieces with only straight edges. The kimonos may look complicated, but constructing one is actually very simple. Let's put a kimono together, one section at a time. This is the body of the kimono. And here are the sleeves. Finally, trim pieces are added to the collar and on the front, and you have the completed kimono. There is a special method for sewing together the strips of fabric. This tailor uses her toes to grasp the fabric as she pulls it taut. Virtually all the seams of a kimono are sewn in straight lines and at right angles. The result is a beautiful garment. Another important part of kimono making is showing off the designs.
The most visible part is the chest. The left side of the chest is where the focal point of the design should be. The second focal point is the area below the knees.
Because the structure of a kimono is simple, you can unstitch the seams and take it apart to wash it. Looked after with proper care, kimonos can be passed down from generation to generation.
Oh, and this one you've got little mini maple leaves in autumn. You've got plum blossoms, that's winter I suppose, and then cherry blossoms over here, so spring. You've got the 3 seasons that this kimono would be being worn. That's beautiful. And here on this table we have all of the other accessories that go with the kimono. Shirataki-san's going to explain to us what they all are.
Okay, first, these are called koshihimo. You use a koshihimo like a belt to keep the kimono in place.
Because there are no buttons and no zips or anything with kimono. And these towels here.
You use it as padding because no one has a straight, cylindrical body, which is the ideal form for wearing a kimono.
That's interesting.
This is obi-ita. It keeps the front of the obi nice and smooth. You actually put it in the obi.
And then finally over here we have the obi itself, which can be and often is as beautiful as the kimono. Let's take a closer look now at the importance of the obi.
A typical obi is about 30 centimeters. Weft threads of many colours are woven through the warp threads. By giving the weft threads a bit of slack, the weaver can create raised patterns. The ability to leave just the right amount of slack is one mark of a talented weaver. Here is an obi with an ancient court theme. Each tiny figure is depicted in rich detail. The man in blue seems to be looking up and laughing. But when you look closer, you see he has no eyes, nose, or mouth. With just tiny loops of thread, the weaver has conjured a lively expression. An obi takes on different looks depending on how it's tied, and there are said to be more than 100 ways to tie an obi. Obi knots came into vogue during samurai times. This knot was named after Kamimura Kichiya, a prominent kabuki actor who was the first person to sport it. It quickly became popular thanks to his celebrity. Later, many new ways of tying an obi were invented. Let's look at a few of them. This butterfly-like knot with loops drooping down on either side is often worn with bridal kimonos. It was popular in the samurai class and does not come undone easily. This next knot, tied diagonally, is bold and dynamic. It's used mainly with broad-sleeve kimonos and is popular among girls and young women. The spectacular knot being tied here is worn when meeting a prospective marriage partner, as well as at wedding banquets and other happy occasions. This knot is meant to look like a sparrow puffed up against the cold. The most common way of tying an obi among women of all ages is this. It's based on this knot that's easy to tie. The sash hangs down the legs. This knot was widely used by the common people in samurai days, and later it was modified to highlight the wearer's femininity. This is the modified version, which was originally worn by geisha. It features a special pillow beneath the obi, and the effect is considered quite sensual. The dangling portion of the obi can also be tucked up to create the simple yet refined knot which is still commonly used. Young geisha use one of the most stunning obi styles. It requires a sash more than 2 meters longer than an ordinary one. The sections overlap like this. The angle of the overlap is designed to give a strong sense of femininity. A beautiful obi, tied in an alluring way, serves to accentuate the sophistication of a kimono.
I knew there were various ways to tie an obi, but not that many. That was really quite astounding. And Shirazaki-san, you have an obi here. It's a beautiful, very ornate, brocaded one. Okay, let's get straight down to it then. Okay, there's a knot going in there. It takes a bit of strength, doesn't it? 結構力いるんですね、これ。
It sure does.
No way that anybody could do this by themselves, I would think.
Right. Wearing broad-sleeved kimonos requires the assistance of another person.
Very nice. And if you just saw somebody walking down the street like this, you probably wouldn't imagine how much work has gone into it. That's really pretty. It looks beautiful. Extremely elaborate. What's it called?
We call it the treasure knot, because this part here is made to look like the top part of a drawstring bag. And down here is the bag itself, containing treasures.
Okay. It actually does look like that. Yes, that's beautiful. Well, there's a long history behind the tying of obi and the wearing of kimono in general. Let's go back now and take a look at some of that history.
The history of the kimono dates back around 1,000 years. Aristocrats in those days wore garments with many layers. The innermost layer, which had narrow sleeves, served as underwear, and it was this layer that became the origin of today's kimono. Obi began to be dyed and decorated with woven patterns and embroidery. Then in 1683 came a pivotal event in the history of the kimono. The shogunate issued a prohibition against showy displays of luxury. This included a ban on ornate kimonos. Gold embroidery was deemed wasteful and was forbidden. Even ordinary embroidery was banned. And so was fabric covered with tie-dyed speckled patterns. To make these, the fabric had to be tied up into countless tiny nubs, a very labour-intensive process. The technique itself was also considered to be extravagant. These laws launched a new era in the history of the kimono. It started in Kyoto with the birth of a brand new technique. It's called paste-resist dyeing, and it allowed colourful compositions to be drawn straight onto the fabric, without embroidery or tying. The outline of the design is traced in paste with a brush. Then the colours are filled in. The paste acts as a barrier, preventing colours from bleeding. After the colours are applied, the fabric is washed. This removes the paste, leaving white outlines. This new Kyoto dyeing technique got around the shogunate's rules. Meanwhile, another fashion revolution was happening in Edo, the shogun's capital. The people of Edo came up with their own chic sensibility. The style is reflected clearly in women's kimonos of the time. There was a shift from bold hues and designs to subdued colours and sleek designs. The new fashion was about understatement. This style of kimono has its design mainly near the bottom of the robe. This simple composition shows boats against an indigo background, which represents a river. It epitomizes the sleek Edo style. Many kimono design techniques that still exist today were first devised to get around official restrictions.
I think you get an idea of the vast variety of designs available in kimono materials, although it's probably easier to imagine how they're going to end up when you see them displayed like this rather than in rolls like this. And over here, we have two types of material here which look from a distance as if they're just plain. But if you look closer, you'll see that there are some wonderful, very, very intricate designs.
These are called Edo Komon. People came up with them during the time when luxurious kimonos were banned because they still wanted to dress stylishly. And out of that desire, their skills developed to the point where such intricate designs could be made.
This one's been dyed, hasn't it?
It was dyed with a stencil, and it's a pine needle pattern.
Pine needles. And it's got kind of a whirly design in here.
This one was inspired by shark skin. So this design, it's shark skin. That's what it's supposed to be.
I didn't notice the cherry blossoms at first. You have to kind of change the angle that you look at it from. Isn't that amazing? Okay, we're going to take a look now at some very different designs from these, but which are enjoying a resurgence of popularity about 100 years after they were first created.
Fresh and creative designs with bold colours. These are the hallmarks of meisen, kimonos made in the 1910s and 20s. Until that time, kimono designs were inspired by the beauty of Japanese nature. But these meisen took inspiration from everything. Even from penguins. At the time, Japanese Antarctic explorers were front-page news, and this kimono capitalized on that interest. Meisen became popular in the 1910s. One reason was that even though they were made of silk, they were extremely cheap. And there was a secret behind the low price. Meisen were made in the Chichibu region of Saitama Prefecture. These are silkworm cocoons used for ordinary silk kimonos. And these are the kind of cocoons that we use to make meisen kimonos. Soiled by the larvae inside, they are useless for making pure white silk. For years they were thrown out. But then, a way of making use of them was invented, and meisen kimonos were born. This storehouse belongs to a family who, up until the 1930s, made meisen kimonos. The storehouse still holds a large collection of the materials needed to produce them. These are stencils that we use to dye patterns onto kimonos. Made of paper reinforced with lacquer, they could be used again and again. One unique thing about meisen is that before weaving begins, the design is dyed onto the warped threads. Dyeing the threads in advance like this creates a fabric with no distinct front or back. If the colours on one side fade, the fabric can be flipped inside out. It's like getting a brand new kimono. Very economical. Now a different stencil is laid on top and another colour is applied. The bright colours hide any evidence of the dirty silk cocoons. Using stencils means it's possible to mass-produce kimonos of the same design. This dramatically cut costs. The family who owns the storehouse has also held onto the original drawings from which the stencils were made. There are more than 200 drawings. But who did them? Written on the back are the names of major Japanese department stores, which were a centre of new fashion in the 1910s and 20s. The stores commissioned artists and in-house designers to create these fresh designs. Meisen kimonos were sold at prices equivalent to 20 to 30,000 yen today, a reasonable amount that was affordable for most women back then. They flocked to buy them, vying to be at the forefront of kimono fashion. By the mid-1920s, half the women walking in Ginza were wearing these affordable garments. They all wanted to find their ideal kimono, one that would make them stand out from the crowd. Sales skyrocketed. Today, there are more and more boutiques that deal in antique kimonos, particularly in central Tokyo. Meisen, with their low cost and vast range of designs, are drawing interest from a new generation of young shoppers. In March 2012, a fashion show of antique meisen kimonos was held. The colours have not faded, even after nearly a century. The vibrant designs still look fresh. These kimonos are a reminder of the unique aesthetic sensibility that the women of that time wore on their sleeve.
As we've seen, young women are starting to wear kimono again for fun. I'll see you again next time.